Hey guys, Travis here. Today we're going to be taking a look at something really interesting. This is a really important mural if you want to check it out. This is actually, somebody was actually mentioning this to me. I was playing the Fatal Frame series, and I know a lot of people have played the series, and a lot of people probably clicked on this video and you want to talk about like the Himuro Mansion, or also known as the Himikyru Mansion. And is there any realism? Where's its exact location? Does it exist? And I'm going to be honest, I've actually been curious myself, and I've actually come across some things that a lot of people haven't, so I'm actually going to kind of make a video kind of giving my 2 cents on the whole thing, and kind of like, if we were to find this mansion, what does this mean, and where can we find that, sort of. So let's get started just to kind of talk about it. So in this video we're going to be talking about the real story and then the fake story of like the Fatal Frame version of it, at least. So we'll start with the Fatal Frame series. If you're not familiar with the Fatal Frame series, it's a famous video game franchise that was made by a company called Tecmo. They made the Ninja Gaiden series and a lot of other video games. They actually made really good video games. I highly recommend checking them out. They're a Japanese company. They made a lot of, I think they made arcade games too, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be confused. But anyways, Tecmo is a company that, one of their major selling points was the Fatal Frame series, and what it mostly detailed was, it was a survival horror game, Japanese horror, survival horror, and it pretty much told you, if you weren't familiar with ageist culture, that most of the stuff that you see in Japanese culture or Asian culture, it's really old and ancient. I think Japan dates back to like 30,000 BC or something like that. It's something really ancient, really old, and there's a lot of like rituals. There's a lot of like a lot of spiritual stuff that a lot of people are said to kind of like like the temples, like this one for example, the Himuro Mansion is said to exist somewhere. And if it's allegedly haunted, let's just say, it's old. It's still something that kind of dates back to the time when this took place, and that's debatable how old it is, but supposedly in the Fatal Frame series, it dates back to the Edo dynasty, EDO, and it's about 400, 500 years old, meaning that it's pretty old for a mansion. But if you were to, and again, let's just kind of, zoom this in a little bit. The Himuro Mansion. Himuro Mansion is only 8 on the list because nobody can accurately verify where it actually exists. And regardless of urban legend, this place mysteriously, the mysterious residence located just outside of Tokyo is. Some people say it's like somewhere in the south, but no one really knows supposedly where it's at. I like how they describe it in Fatal Frame though. They say that maybe the mansion was. Like, a lot of people knew about it, but then people just kind of lost track of it for a while, and then then it was just recently found again, or something like that. But whether or not the game itself is real, and obviously in this case it's fake, you have to really ask yourself, though, if the mansion itself really does exist, does it really, what would be true about it, It'd really be an interesting one. Because some stuff has got to be true and some of it doesn't, And what really compels me to believe that it's real is because I've actually talked to a lot of people in Japan, not people who claim to be from Japan, but people who have actually been from Japan, and they will tell you that there are people that, even in Japan, they will talk about this place saying that it exists. They don't know where it's at, but they say that it exists somewhere. And my point is, if that is true, if it was just a hoax or a myth, and there was just a legend, then why would so many people even bring it up then? Still wanting to know if it's real, even in Japan, Not to mention, this brings up another good point. Some people have argued in the Fatal Frame series, it says only outside of Japan in the English versions, it's based on a true story. Well, that was just to get people to, kind of get into the legend a little bit, or rather the game. But in Japan, though, they didn't have to put that in the Japanese version because people already knew it existed, so they kind of wanted people to kind of take it a little bit better, if that makes sense, to understand it. So anyways, let's kind of read into it a little bit more. Okay, so according to the legend, it says, these are just based off urban legends. So the Himuro Mansion, so this is what people think about when they think about this place, was apparently the site of some bizarre and occultistic practices, meaning like really weird and obscure, unexplained, supernatural. Grisly murders occurred in modern Japan. Again, 500, 400 years ago, maybe like a couple thousand years ago. The temple. I don't know the exact age, but it's pretty old though. And that's another thing about Asia, you know, the way they build their stuff, how ancient and mysterious and marvelous it is, it still stands as like some of the greatest structures in, you know, history. It says the local lore is that there was a family that practiced a twisted Shinto ritual called the strangling ritual, seemingly to seal off bad karma in the earth every 50 years or so. The ritual consisted of a maiden, which means virgin in this case, and the female, raised in complete isolation, meaning being tied and quartered, meaning like she was cut off from the rest of the world as a sacrifice. Apparently sometime in the 20th century, the maiden sacrifices love, or attempted to save the maiden. So she fell in love apparently, which ended up tainting the ritual. In response, the master of the house murdered everybody in the family before killing himself. Since then, these local legends suggest that the ghosts of the murdered family members consistently lure people to the mansion in an attempt to complete the ruined ritual. The story of the Himuro Mansion was used as a backstory of the hit video game series Fatal Frame 1. Now, again, you know, Fatal Frame 1, if it's anything, I mean, again, it's just a game, but if it's anything I've learned from that game, if the mansion itself, in fact, does exist, there's another good point that the game brought up that would be really interesting, that there would probably be secret rooms and sealed tunnels that probably, like, so apparently the place is bigger than the original blueprints of the mansion itself. So, you know, the people that own the mansion probably put, like, again, like some hidden rooms and secret rooms and tunnels and all this other cool stuff that really wasn't in the original design of the mansion. So, like, only the people that, I mean, again, assuming this place exists, the people that would go there and explore this place, only then could they explore and figure out what made sense and what didn't. Because if that is the case, then what that essentially means is that the place is bigger than it allegedly says it is. So, that's actually pretty cool to think about. Now, there are some pictures on the internet that actually do sort of look realistic. I be honest with you, I don't know who took these, how old these pictures could be, and even realistically, you know, if they really did find this, then it has to be true somehow. But, like, you know, you got, like for example, you could have, like obviously this would be like one of the main rooms, like, obviously you can tell, like, over here'd be something, but all the walls are chipped and the ceiling looks like it's about to cave in, and then the doors still stand. If you're not familiar with Japan, some of the most common ways their doors is like they slide open, like kind of like a closet door. Instead of like opening up, you would put your hand on the door and you would slide it to the left or right. It's really interesting how they, you know, the architectural, again, you know, kind of study the structure of the interior designs and all that. I mean, like the inside of it and all that. If you're not familiar with what I mean by, like, all of the way these material works, or I could just tell you. This is another picture. This is like as if you would see it outside. Again, you know, let's see, it's surrounded by trees, woods. It's a place that's out and abandoned. And in fact, even in Japan, there's a lot of abandoned places that you could just randomly find. Some of them are easier than others, but, you know, the more common accepted premise is that, you know, this place was if it does in fact exist, it was an old mansion that somebody forgot about and then maybe just recently found not too long ago. Here's another picture. It looks like the hallway is what they call it, and the inside of it would be like, you know, like these walls could slide open again like the doors. And you got like these art panels, because again, Asia was really well known for, like, and here's like the ceiling and all that, you know, and the temples where they sit on the floor. You know, it's really cool. And then there's like a back door back there, wherever that leads. They call this the Great Hall, if I'm not mistaken. This is actually fan art, but this is actually really interesting. I had to share this one. Someone on DeviantArt, Azure Spirit, I forget exactly how to pronounce it. These are like the steps, sort of. It's fan art, but it's essentially like there's like a long entryway, and you'll know you found this place because it kind of makes quite an entrance. It's like kind of like a really well opening place that you'd find like the steps and stairs to, and you just take these steps and you'd follow like this long hallway all the way down to the mansion, up to you kind of make a few turns, but essentially that's where you would probably find it if the place does in fact exist. Okay, this screenshot is actually from like, again, the game. But again, you know, here's the steps, and eventually you would eventually get to the mansion if that was in fact the original intent. The original intent would be that, you know, you have like a long entryway, and then eventually you would come to the mansion itself, or the grounds of it rather. So it was like there was like a couple places, like a shrine, and outside, like, you know, like there could be what is known as, like, there's a bunch of trees that grow inside and all that, and there was like supposed to be like a little, like a pathway you could walk through, and it kind of like a backyard of some kind. And not only that, but it was like a little area that, you know, contributed to like wildlife and all that, which, you know, kind of, you know, Japan has like what is known as a lot of really cool things. Like they'd have like a little area that they could celebrate something, and they could appreciate like nature and their spirits, and something to do with just their rituals, and well, not just rituals, but like their like suffice certain gods, and just the way their yards would look, their outside gardens, and their trees, and essentially their backwoods, their acreage. Here's another entryway. Somebody uploaded this. There's something, I don't know exactly what this is, but this is like a tunnel you would go through, not like an underground tunnel, but this is like a walkway sort of tunnel that essentially leads to the mansion. You would encounter this before you run into the mansion. So if such a place like this exists, then essentially this place has quite an entrance. You know, you'd have to go through like a long horde of ordeals, but eventually you would get to the mansion itself. Here's the walkway again, one more walkway I should say in a realistic perspective. Here's another picture of the place, if it does in fact exist. It's supposed to be like the observatory room, but, you know, where does all the light come from? Because the way the mansion works, at least in a more common setting, there really isn't too much light that can find its way into this place, if it does in fact exist. Because the way the mansion works is, this mansion wasn't built with electricity, it was built with candles and essentially all the other stuff that, you know, Asia. Okay, so here's another picture. Essentially, this is like another old picture somebody took. It's, again, really, it looks realistic, but it looks like somebody edited it at the same time. Not really sure if this is kind of real or fake, but this is like the kind of like something from the Fatal Frame. It's the Narukami Shrine. Okay, but I'll just kind of start to wrap this up a little bit. Okay, so essentially what we really need to know, if the mansion does in fact exist, is that if the place really does exist, then it's essentially older than what we think it is. And if it is in an area that we haven't seen, then it's got to be somewhere like on the outskirts of Tokyo. The way I look at it, there has to be some evidence that this place does in fact exist, because people to this day still talk about it. And if people didn't, then they would just forget about it, like they'd say it's a hoax and they wouldn't even mention it anymore. But that's just not how it works in this case. Because, again, if you ask a lot of people that live in Japan, they'll tell you that, yes, you know, there is actually some truth based off it. And at the same time, yes, there actually is other places, while they're a lot easier to find. Let me give you another example. There's another place called Hijime, or Hijiki, or something like that, castle. It's like out in the open. It's a really, on that top 10 list I showed you at the beginning of this video, it's on that list. It's out in the open, and they say it's also haunted, but they say that the owners of the castle, they don't want anyone going in it, though, for certain reasons. So, really, again, if the place really does exist, and there are places in Japan that are really, or even Asia, it kind of makes you really wonder, what really happened there? Does the place exist? Because if the place does exist, then, again, it's all by itself. What is true? You know, what's true and what's false about it? Because that all by itself proves that it has to mean something.